You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast, episode 88 of season number 3. Crawly, Cody Bellinger has opted in. Don't forget to listen, download, review, most importantly, subscribe to the podcast, follow on all the socials. 670 on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, email Crawly and I, flythew670 at gmail.com. All right, Crawly, kind of snuck up on me a little bit, I'll admit, but I saw, was it Saturday morning that Cody Bellinger is back as a Cub?
Yep, Saturday morning, the news broke, and it was, I think it was shocking because, if you're reading the tea leaves and listening to people in the know, it looked like he was going to opt out, and instead he opts in. And so, it's interesting because when we last talked, we went over the calendar of the important dates to come, right. And this one was obviously the big one because 3 different things have happened since the World Series has ended. And so eligible free agents were the first one, right? The day after the World Series ended, those eligible players became free agents. And then there's that 5-day exclusive window to come up with a deal. And so time-wise today, Monday, when we're recording this at 4 p.m., that's when, you're a free agent and you could talk to any team. So the original team doesn't have exclusivity. And so when that came today, there was also a deadline today for teams and players to make decisions on the contract options. And that's where Cody Bellinger comes in, right? So if a player had an opt-out clause, or if the club did, or if they both did, everybody had to make a decision by today, 4 p.m. And so some of these decisions were made earlier than that. Some of those were made and are still rolling off right now. If you're watching Twitter and stuff like that, it's still going on. As far as the free agents, Dustin, there was only 2 that the Cubs had that became free agents. As far as, the first one up was Jorge Lopez. On Friday night, he declared himself a free agent. He signed a 1-year, $2 million contract at the beginning of the season with the Mets. And he was okay. He's durable. He's one of those durable guys. He had a 1-2 record with a 3.76 ERA, 19 strikeouts, and 26 in third innings. But it all fell apart for him on May 29th, right? It's a blowout loss to the Dodgers, and he came in late into the game. He gave up a 2-run homer to Ohtani, and then right after that, he was ejected for shouting at third base umpire Ramon de Jesus on an appeal on a Freddie Freeman check swing. And if you remember, Lopez points it to Jesus, he yells some more, drops the ball, he walks off the mound, he untucks his jersey, and then he throws his glove over the protective netting into the stands. And then after the games, this is where the real big mistake came. He is from Puerto Rico, right? Lopez is, and he answered questions without an interpreter. And then some of the comments were misconstrued as he was saying that, so Lopez said, that, I'm the worst teammate, but it came off as saying the Mets were the worst team. He tried to clarify it on Instagram. Damage is done. He's DFA'd by the Mets the next day and then released on June 5th. And I remember this at the time, Dustin. You and I were like, well, why don't they just take a flyer on him? The Cubs bullpen sucked at that point in time.
Yep.
And I don't know if it was a change of scenery or the fact that he was pitching for his old skipper, Craig Counsell. But Lopez comes in, makes 24 appearances with the Cubs, 2.03 ERA. And to me, Dustin, it looked like he became one of the most trusted arms for Craig out of the pen.
For a little bit, absolutely.
He unfortunately got injured at the end, but, I could see the Cubs looking to re-sign Lopez, but he definitely helped his stock with how well he pitched.
Yeah,
and I think
he had some good time here. Absolutely. Yeah. And let's see how much Craig has say in the building of this new bullpen. That's going to be something different this off season around than last off season because of the timing of everything, right?
Right. It was real late when Craig signed with the Cubs. So as far as coaches and players, obviously he didn't have that much input. But the other thing to think about when we talk about Cody Bellinger and his opt-out is that there's a lot less room for the Cubs to make moves. And, the real the 2 places that you can now make moves is starting pitching, which the Cubs had a top 10 rotation pretty much the whole season. And the bullpen, which really hurt the Cubs, you can't go in like that. So if you have money to spend, then the only places that you can really spend it right now, from just looking at things right now, is on the rotation, is on the bullpen. And so Jorge Lopez could definitely, I think, be a guy that comes back and makes a difference.
Absolutely. I mean, they have to rebuild the bullpen. There's no question about that. That's about as obvious as the nose on the end of our faces, Crawly.
And it's not only that, it's you can't kind of go in the way that they've gone last year. Like, we're going to take a couple of reclamation projects and try to, spin them around. And by the time,
right.
you
can't
stop
wait. Stop being cute about it. Right. Yeah.
Right. You got to come in with some guys that can pitch. And that's the difference. The other player to declare free agency on Friday night, Dustin, and with everything that happened with Cody Bellinger on Saturday, I think maybe, it got a little bit lost, is Kyle Hendricks elected to become a free agent. He was drafted and signed by the Texas Rangers in 2011, came to the Cubs in a Ryan Dempster trade at the deadline in 2012. So, it's not like he was with the Cubs his entire career, but pretty close.
Well, the part that anybody remembers.
Right. You're talking about, 12 years with the, with a little less than 12 years with the Cubs. But when you're talking about Kyle's career achievements, and he is 7th in franchise history in strikeouts with 1,172, which, again, he's not an overpowering pitcher. So sometimes you forget about all the strikeouts that he had.
Right. But that's what longevity will also get you, right?
Right. And when you talk about longevity, 10th in franchise history with 246 starts. Victories, 17th in franchise history with 93 victories. But, when you look at the guys that are ahead of him, when you talk about modern day, there's not too many modern day pitchers. You're talking about guys like Carlos Zambrano and Rick Russell, guys like that. But most of the guys are like pre-1945.
Right.
When you talk about victory or NL Rookie of the Year, he finished 7th in voting in 2014. NL Cy Young, he was 3rd in voting in 2016. Do you remember who was the Cy Young Award winner there in 2016?
No.
Jake Arrieta.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go. Makes sense. Yeah. Jake.
So, and he was 9th in 2020 when it came to that. He holds the club record for the longest streak of allowing 8 or fewer hits in a start from June 2015 to May 2018. Holds the club record for the longest stretch by a Cubs starter to begin his career of walking 3 or fewer in each start since at least and then he won the ERA title in 2016. I think when you talk about Lester and you talk about Arrieta, you forget it was Hendricks who had the lowest ERA on the staff and in the National League. He was the starting pitcher for Game 6 of the NLCS when they won the pennant, and he was the Game 7 starter in the World Series. The last player now, Dustin, from that 2016 team is gone.
Yeah, very last, right? There's nobody even there's no staff even around from that team, right?
Well, there's a little fluke in that, and it happened today. And so we'll talk about it. There is a little fluke in that. But Kyle is, he signed a 4-year deal in 2020 for $55 million. Last offseason, the Cubs picked up his team option after he pitched really well after he recovered from shoulder surgery in 2023. 2024, he had a 5.92 ERA, the highest of his career. He was demoted from the starting pitching into the starting rotation into the bullpen after just an awful April. And then because of injuries to Jordan Wicks and Ben Brown, he comes back in the rotation. But he couldn't go deep into games. Like, you're lucky if you got 4 or 5 out of them. He struggled after 2 times in the order. I think what you and I, Dustin, will remember a lot, and I just wish it would have been the last game of the season, but that final start is probably as a Cub, 7 1/3 innings and gave up only 2 hits against the Reds. The team he debuted against, of all things.
Yeah, that was a good one.
I know he wants to pitch in 2025. I cannot see it being with the Cubs. I just don't see it.
Yeah, and if it's not here, I just don't know where it's going to be, right? I mean, we'll see. I don't know. Yeah,
and I think the whole world thinks that Kyle will come back to Chicago one day. I think he would be someone that they want in the organization in some kind of capacity. And after seeing Mark Pryor in the World Series a whole bunch, maybe he starts making his way through the coaching ranks.
Yeah, maybe. Be interesting to see if it's something he would want to do. He's made good money though. I mean, would he want to coach?
Again, he's a young guy. He's like, he's not that old. And so you got to ask yourself, well, what's he going to do with the rest of his life? Does he want to go front office, right? Because everyone, he obviously has a degree from Dartmouth and all that, and all, and he's really intelligent. He gets the nickname the professor, so he can do whatever he wants. I think he is going to have.
Well, that's just it, right, Crawly? Right. I think he can do whatever. I think he'll be able to do whatever he wants to do.
Right. And so he's still a young guy. So I think that I just don't think he's going to be one of those guys that just sits there golfing the rest of his life, right? I don't see him being like a John Lackey or something like that.
What if he do media? He likes to talk. He's good on the air. Maybe he'd do media.
I think front office is where I would see him more than anything, in my opinion. Two more Cubs that there were options on. We'll talk about the less big one right now. Drew Smyly, the team, he had a mutual opt out right there, and the Cubs did not pick that up.
For 10 mil though, I would sure hope not.
No, he signed a 2-year, $19 million contract before the 2023 season that included a mutual option. And he looked good in the second half of 2022 after recovering from injuries. But 2023, he lost his rotation spot, moved to the bullpen, and he did not make a single start in 2024. That's why he's not getting $10 million. But he was one of the only lefty options for Craig Counsell out of the pen. Right. And so that's where we talked before, man. You got to get something better to start the season. And you can't go in. If you remember last year, it was Smyly and Leiter Jr. and Luke Little had a little bit of time there, but you got to come in. You can't just have one lefty half the time. You know what I mean?
No, God. It's just a poorly constructed, and not just poorly constructed. I know injuries are a part of it, but poorly constructed bullpen.
Right, and then we get to the big news: Cody Bellinger's decision to opt in. Remember, Cody signed a 1-year, $17.5 million contract after he struggled the previous few years with the Dodgers. Then in 2023, he slashed 307, 356, 525. He hit 26 home runs and drove in 97 RBIs. Dustin, I think you call it the straw that stirs the drink.
Right.
He slashed, like I said, and he was named the Comeback Player of the Year. Now, there's two different Comeback Player of the Year's award. There's one issued by the MLB beat writers, and there's one at the Players Awards. He won both of them. And so him and Scott Boras were looking to parlay that into a big contract, but Cody didn't get the offer he was looking for. And then right at the beginning of spring training, he agreed to a 3-year, $80 million deal that had opt-outs after the first and second year of the deal. And so he got $30 million that first year, and then 27.5 is what he was going to make in 2025. And again, we thought, hey, he's going to probably test the market again, but no, he opts back in. And like we said, both of us, I think, are pretty surprised about that.
Yeah. What was your initial reaction, Crawly, when you first saw this move on social media or however you found out?
So I guess part of me is selfish. Here's the thing, right? It's very similar. He gets compared a lot to Chris Bryant. Both of them were Rookie of the Years and then later on became MVPs and just looked like great players until injury tended to, slow them down. And for me with Cody Bellinger, I think we know who the center field of the future for this team is, and hopefully that is PCA. And I think Cody Bellinger is a great player when he's healthy. I just think he has a really hard time staying healthy. And so if he's the guy that was there for 2023, where he had a slight, I think, leg injury when he got injured in Houston. But then this year, he had a couple of injuries and the numbers just were not there. 266, 18 homers, 78 RBIs. He had a rib fracture. I think he hurt his finger one time. I'm okay with it, but now all of a sudden, us talking on the podcast and us, looking at the offseason, what are the moves they're going to do? It limits the Cubs a lot in what they're going to do because the outfield's set. You're bringing back what you had before, which is Happ in left, PCA center, and Bellinger in right, and then you're going to have Seiya Suzuki DHing. And so that really leaves very little moves for the Cubs to do. If they want to move Michael Busch to second, I don't see them getting rid of Michael Busch for first base. Third base, you got Isaac Paredes. You hope he has a better year, and you want to get some catching depth. But what can you do when you look around the diamond? Where I think if Cody Bellinger opted out, you would have $26 million more to play around with, $27 million more. And then you can start looking at free agents, which we're going to do in the next episode. With Anthony Santander, who had like 40 home runs, could you plug him into right field? There's a lot more that you could have done if he would have opted out. But that's not the case. So you just really hope that he stays healthy and he can have a solid year. But, he only had one really good year since, 2018, 2019, right around there when he got injured with that shoulder. So I don't know what Cody Bellinger we're going to see. Right.
Well, it does make the Cubs one of the best around the outfield groups, right? I mean, no doubt about it. Defensively, it's a hell of a defensive outfield. No,
we
no
talked
doubt
about
about it, right?
we talked about our concerns with Seiya, and occasionally, it always seems to be under the brightest lights, just some pretty bad errors, some mistakes. And so you look at this and you say, okay, well, this is the team. Now, Dustin, there was one other final deadline today. The teams had to reinstate all the players out of the 60-day injured list, right? And so when a player is on the 60-day IL, they don't count against your 40-man roster. But today, you had to take all those guys on the 60-day IL, guys that are not ready to play right now, that wouldn't be ready if the season started today, and put them on your 40-man roster. So in alphabetical order, these are the guys that were on the 60-day IL. Yency Almonte, he came in with the Michael Busch deal. Adbert Alzolay, Colton Brewer, punched the wall, broke his hand. Ben Brown, Brennan Davis, Luke Little, Julian Merriweather, Nick Madrigal, right? And so with Hendricks, Smyly, Lopez, and backup catcher Caleb Knight off the 40-man roster, they had 36 players on the 40-man roster with 8 players coming off. So we knew that there would have to be some moves today. And Dustin, there were right before we jumped on here. The Cubs have claimed Rob Zastrinsky. Do you remember Rob Zastrinsky?
I do remember him.
He was drafted, I want to say, in 2013. And so when you said earlier about Kyle Hendricks, Rob Zastrinsky pitched in 2016. So he has a 2016 ring.
Oh, geez. We're getting technical now.
We're getting technical. We're getting technical here. So they claimed him off waivers from the Brewers. In a corresponding move, right-handed pitcher Jimmy Herger was DFA'd. He was a guy that they picked up on a waiver deal. The following players cleared waivers and were elected to free agency: Yency Almonte, Christian Bethancourt, Colton Brewer, and Enole Paredes. So with Paredes and Herger, those were guys that were picked up late in the season in August, September. Bethancourt, we know that he was a backup catcher. Yency Almonte got injured. Brewer. So right now the roster stands at 40-man exactly. So there's still going to be moves made, Dustin, because obviously we talked about wanting to get starters and relievers. So, for guys that we looked at the 40-man roster, when we talk about Adbert, when we talk about Brennan Davis is on the 40-man roster, Nick Madrigal, Patrick Wisdom, those are all guys that if the Cubs, every time the Cubs pick somebody up, whether it's waiver, whether it's free agent, whether it's trade, they're going to have to get rid of a guy. So the Cubs are not done making moves. The 40-man roster is what it is right now, but it's something we're going to be watching all offseason. And if you're, again, Nick Madrigal or Patrick Wisdom or Adbert Alzolay, it's not a lock that they're going to be on the 40-man roster when springtime comes. I'd be shocked if all those guys were still on the roster.
You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It is episode 88 of season number 3. Cody Bellinger opts in. Don't forget to give us one of those 5-star reviews and email us at flythew670@gmail.com and watch us. That's right, on the 670 The Score YouTube page. In this segment, Crawly talking to Alex Cohen, play-by-play announcer, AAA Cubs, find out how the team did this season and what prospects will be ready to contribute at the big league level of 2025.
Joining me now on the Fly the W podcast, we're happy to have back our old friend Alex Cohen as we finish the ladder climbing of the Cubs affiliate. Alex, play-by-play voice for your Iowa Cubs. How's it going, Alex?
It's going great. Just counting down the days till baseball season. Obviously, the World Series ended and people are becoming free agents and people are signing contracts and got the Premier 12. You have the winter meetings and then you'll take one blink and spring training will be there. So
I don't know if you saw the breaking news. Rob Zastrinsky's back with the Cubs.
Yeah, Rob Z, baby, bringing his 2016 World Series ring. But no, I mean, Rob Z was with the Iowa Cubs my first year there in 2018. Great guy, good left-handed pitcher. And, Cubs have a really good track record when it comes to taking chances on minor league arms that have had big league experience. They did it with Mark Leiter Jr. a couple of years ago. Obviously, was a big part of the Cubs bullpen for 3 years and just did it with Tyson Miller, making a trade after he was designated for assignment for Jake Slaughter, was one of the best Cubs relievers. So Cubs have a really good track record of that over the last couple of years, and hopefully Rob Z adds to that track record.
So I got to ask you, you mentioned Tyson Miller and Mark Leiter and stuff like that. Like when you see these guys after they've left the organization and somehow come back, is it a little bit like, hey, welcome back? Is it just like they never left?
Yeah, especially with Tyson, because Tyson was on the Iowa Cubs in 2019, 2021, then made it to the big leagues and got DFA'd, then played for 3 other big league teams and is now back, albeit in a different role, but he's the same type of guy. And, with Tyson especially, which is like, it feels like yesterday that we were, celebrating the 2019 Pacific Coast League Division Championship together. And now 2024, 5 years later, you're a high leverage reliever up in the big leagues for the Cubs after 4 separate spots. So, it's pretty cool.
So, Alex, I think, when it comes to, obviously the minor leagues are different, it's not always about record, it's about development and talent and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I always feel like the AAA is always kind of the toughest to get a read because it's almost like you got so many guys going up and down. It's must be hard to kind of develop cohesion as a team.
Well, it certainly is. And then it's all dictated on the time of year. I mean, when you get to April and May, it's a pitcher's league because it's cold and the arms are usually in better, spots in the bats because they have more repetition, they have more bullpens, they have more in-game action. And then you have May, June, a little bit of July where it's more of a hitter's league. And then guys start getting promoted around the trade deadline. So when it comes to August, it's tough to really evaluate the growth of a player just because there's so much of a change in personnel due to guys going up, guys getting traded, guys going to different affiliates. So you could really break down the AAA season into 3 different seasons.
Yeah, and so in the first half, the Cubs finished with a record of 33-42, and then in the second half, 35-40. So you saw some improvement in the second half. How much of that had to do with promotions of some of the younger guys?
Yeah, a big part of it. So once, Matt Shaw got promoted, James Triantos got promoted, Kevin Alcantara got promoted up to the Iowa Cubs right around the trade deadline. If you look at that small sample size from, I think it was August 1st was the first game that all 3 of them played together up till September 23rd. Iowa Cubs are 5 games over 500, and we're averaging over 5 runs per game. So I think just adding those 3 bats into the lineup, and there was no real learning curve for them. If you look at their AAA stats, all their OPSs were 750 and above. If you look at Triantos, he was hitting around 300. Matt Shaw was a monster the last 21 days, and Kevin Alcantara was really good over his last month. So you're looking at 3 guys who were, 22, 21, 21 respectively, 3.5 years younger than the average AAA player, and playing really well coming up to a different level. So I was really impressed.
And for me right now, we got the news this weekend, Cody Bellinger's back and, everyone's happy about that. But it's kind of this interesting point right now where if you take a look at the Cubs' top 30 prospects, 6 of the top 10, first 6, you mentioned some of them: Matt Shaw, Owen Casey, Cade Horton, Moises Ballesteros, James Triantos, Kevin Alcantara. Now, obviously, Cade got injured, and like you said, a couple of those guys came up after the trade deadline. But it's interesting for me because I'm kind of looking at this, and it just seems like there's like a little bit of a logjam, and obviously these guys can be used as trade bait and stuff like that. But it's amazing to see that all of this talent now is all completely, so much of it is concentrated in AAA.
Yeah, it's a really good problem to have. Credit to Jed Hoyer, Carter Hawkins, and company for the players that they've drafted at the upper echelon of their drafts over the last 3 years have just gone up through the ranks. Jordan Wicks was, a college first-round draft pick, 2.5 years ago, up in the big leagues. Matt Shaw, college first-round draft pick 1.5 years ago, first full year in minor league baseball this year, up at AAA, step away from the big leagues, and Cam Smith looks like he's following that trek after his start in affiliated ball with Myrtle Beach, South Bend, and Tennessee. So, that's just a testament to the Cubs and how they've been able to draft and scout amateur talent. So it's a really, really good problem to have. And, it's better for there to be a logjam and to have a lot of resources than not to have a logjam and not have resources. So it's easier to deal from a place of strength than it is from weakness.
So right now, the Cubs are looking and trying to figure out, okay, well, where can we get more pop in the big league lineup? Where can we get some more home runs? And so obviously Nico is at second base. He's injured. We don't know about the timeline, about the recovery, all these things. You know how that goes. You could always have a setback.
Yeah.
As far as Matt Shaw is concerned, How does he look to you at second base? And you also have Triantos. When you look at those guys,
Yeah.
how do they look at second base, and how do they look at the plate as far as pop is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of defensive second baseman, they're average. I mean, they're not going to play as well as Nico Horner at a Gold Glove caliber level. I think Matt Shaw has instincts naturally. Remember, he was a shortstop at Maryland, so his instincts are more left side of the infield. I thought he was really good at third when he played with the I-Cubs. I thought he was fine at second. I think James is an average defender, really good athlete. And from a hitting perspective, James is a lot like Nico, a lot of contact, doesn't strike out a lot, really good two-strike approach, probably hits 270, 280 up in the big leagues, not that much pop. And Matt Shaw, I mean, you look at the season that he had in AA and AAA, over 20 home runs, over 30 stolen bases. So he had the power speed combination that not many infielders have had in the Cubs system in a long time. I mean, I think his offensive profile, it's a little bit of Javi Baez without the swing and miss. So it's a good offensive profile for Shaw when it comes to power, speed, and just explosiveness.
Now, for me, when I look at Owen Casey, I still can't believe he's only 22.
Yeah.
Because it seems like, it's been years since that Darvish trade, but he is still sitting there plugging away. What did you notice from Owen this year?
He was the most consistent player with the Iowa Cubs, playing every day, can run, good at bats, 380 on base percentage. Owen would have, an 0 for 4 day at the plate and then string together 3 consecutive games of 2 hits, 3 hits. And, he's somebody who really learned with every game, routes to take in the outfield, how to run the bases effectively. You could see the power in the summer really jolt up. I mean, he ended the season with close to 50 extra base hits, and he didn't have, I think he had 3 home runs at Memorial Day. So it's just like, oh, where's the power? Well, it came during the summer. And, he's a guy who's just going to get bigger. He's just going to get stronger. He's an elite athlete. He can really run. He's durable. He's a good competitor, great eye at the plate, and great bat to ball skills. So I couldn't be more impressed with him.
Now, a guy that I've been looking at and you got to see for about a little over a month, Moises Ballesteros. I caught him when he was in Myrtle Beach. And I've been watching his career, and now he's tearing it up in the Arizona Fall League.
Yeah.
And he's actually thrown out some base runners. And I know that's going to be the big question is, can Moises be a guy that can play behind the plate? Because that would be huge if he could do that and work with Miguel Amaya and DH in days when he's not catching.
Yeah, he can flat out hit. And I think from a catching perspective, he's only 20 years old. He turns 21 at the latter half of November. But he's a guy who has a plus arm, who has really good hands, who has good intangibles, and he's growing into his body. And he lost like 20 pounds when he was with the Iowa Cubs, and he's eating healthy. And he's getting on a nutrition plan. He's working out. He's getting stronger. And Moises is the type of player, if he can just become an average defensive catcher, he's going to become an all-star. I mean, he can hit. He's that good, in my opinion. I mean, I think that, everyone says, oh, he's going to be Alejandro Kirk. Alejandro Kirk's a good player. I mean, for Toronto, he's a borderline all-star catcher. I think he's better. So I think that if it were me and somebody would say, hey, out of this group of Cubs prospects, all 6 of them that you just named, Paulie, who is going to be the Cubs all-star? Like, who would you bet to be the all-star? And I would guess Moises. Like, that would be my guess. I called you Paulie. I meant Crawly. But
that's all good.
But yeah, I mean, if somebody were to ask me out of this crop of Cubs prospects, who would you bet to be the all-star? It would be Moises.
And that it's the funny thing because, like I said, I was at Myrtle Beach and it was him and Michael Arias were the 2 guys that just blew my mind. I was like,
yeah,
man, these guys are just at a different level than everybody else around them. And so it's fun to watch the development. Another guy that we watch, obviously Anthony Rizzo was in the World Series with New York, but Kevin Alcantara, and I don't know if you have a chance to talk to, a lot of the guys, but, for like Nelson Velasquez, right? Or Kevin Alcantara, it's like, you just wish these guys could somehow get every day at bats. And it's so hard when you get to the major leagues, but how hard is it for those guys, do you think, or if they've ever told you maybe to sit there, when they're playing every single day at every level that they've been at their entire lives. And then all of a sudden you get to the majors and it's like, okay, yeah, today you're in the lineup, but then you're sitting for like 4 or 5 days, and then oh yeah, you got to face a major league player when you're cold off the bench.
Yeah, or coming in a pinch hit situation with Emmanuel Clase throwing 102-mile-per-hour cutters at you. I can imagine it's really difficult. I think for guys like Nelson Velasquez and Alexander Canario, it's a little bit more difficult just because they're more rhythm hitters when it comes to power. I think Kevin can do a little bit more because he can really run and he can really defend. I mean, Kevin has all the capabilities of being at least a 4-tool player, possibly a 5-tool player. So I think with Kevin, he brings a little bit more to the table. I mean, he is an elite athlete. If you talk to some of the Cubs coaches, and when it comes to their first step back in the outfield in left, center, and right, I mean, it's on par with Pete Crow Armstrong. So the sky's the limit for Kevin. I think when it comes to power, you look at Canario, you think Nelson Velasquez. Kevin Alcantara isn't quite like that, although he's really got some juice. But all things considered, I think Kevin can really make an impact in a variety of different ways. And, of course, you would love him to play every day, but you don't necessarily need that from him.
And as far as the pitchers in Iowa, I mean, obviously Brandon Birdsell made a big impression, minor league pitcher of the year. Riley Thompson, another guy that was looking really interesting, and Chris Clark. Out of those three guys, do you see anybody breaking through as a starter?
Yeah, probably Brandon, just because he's a guy who he can get it up there to 97 to 98. He did it in college at Texas Tech. And then you saw later in the year for the I-Cubs, he was striking out more guys. The fastball velocity was picking up and he was getting more guys out. So I think Brandon's more of like a thoroughbred. Like he reminds me a little bit of like a 2024 version of Derek Lowe, just like a big guy, imposing figure on the mound, and everything is heavy. Everything is sharp. He breaks bats. He throws inside. He challenges a lot. So I was really impressed with Brandon Birdsell. He most definitely deserved the Cubs minor league pitcher of the year, and I think that he's a big leaguer.
And as far as guys out of the bullpen, that are really, really throwing gas, who do you really look at and you're just like, wow, that guy just really has that arm that's going to play as a late inning reliever.
Yeah, you brought it up with Michael Arias. I mean, it's still really raw. Remember, he was signed as a position player, as a shortstop, and location has been an issue. But in terms of pure stuff, man, it is absolutely electric. It's like a 97-mile-per-hour long toss when he's throwing on the mound. He can get it up to 99. It's a power sinker. His secondary stuff is nasty. He's really athletic on the mound. I just think he needs to get more reps. He's got to get an invite to big league spring training, which he will because he's on the 40-man roster. And just seeing what can change, develop, and mature from age 22 to age 23. I mean, in terms of pure potential and stuff, it's right up there, back end of the bullpen type of stuff for Michael Arias.
Now, at the end of the year, there's always these waiver wire deals and kind of things going crazy. One guy that was kind of interesting is Jack Neely. And, 6'8", 245. I mean, talk about imposing figure on the mound. What did you see when you got to take a look at Jack Neely?
Well, he was always up and down from the big leagues and then back to Iowa. I only got to see him in a stretch of 2 or 3 consecutive appearances once. And when he did that, he was lights out. So I think being able to see Jack during spring training where he gets more we'll go with a reliable schedule where he goes to big league spring training and he probably throws every other day. And I mean, it's just, again, you're 6'8", you're 245 pounds. It's free and easy coming out of the hand. When you get to that type of length and arm angle, there's a propensity for the fastball to get a little straight. And I think, you saw that a little bit in the big leagues, but if you can somehow cut it, sink it, and mix that with all of his secondary stuff and just natural deception that he has from his arm angle, I think he could be really good too.
And it was so fun getting to hear you call spring training games again. Are you looking forward to, obviously, we're just now, the World Series just over and it's just daylight savings time and it's getting to that dark period of baseball. But for guys like you and me, it's always, hey, can we end up possibly, spring training is always a lot of fun and you get a lot of access to be able to go around and look at the players and kind of see them. And that's always a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, I can't wait. Right when the World Series ended, I looked on my calendar and saw 113 days until the start of Cactus League play. And yeah, I can't wait. And it's an exciting Cubs team with, I know you look 83 and 79. It's only 4 games over 500, but you combine the guys that are coming back. You combine that with the ascension of the rookies, the year that Michael Busch had, the second half that Pete Crow Armstrong had, the year that Shota Imanaga had. And then with the 6 top prospects prospects that you brought up, guys who are really at the forefront of the organization's plans. You put that all together and you combine that with the trip to Japan to play the World Series champion, the Dodgers. That'll happen in March. It's going to be a lot of fun. I really can't wait for it.
Well, Alex, all I'm going to say is when you were up calling games in Chicago, there was a no-hitter. So yeah. I think you got the luck. I look forward to seeing you. Are you going to go to the opening weekend in Arizona?
We'll see. I got that marked on the calendar. Hopefully I can see you down there, and I'm sure you'll be in Cubs gear and smiling and celebrating. And yeah, I mean, that's the hope. I always love going down to Arizona. I always love, checking at Sloan Park and, going out in Mesa. So yeah, that's the plan. That's the hope.
And we love seeing you walking down that pathway from by the Performance Center all the way to Sloan Park. Yeah. If you could do us a favor, tell our listeners where they can follow you, because you always have a lot of interesting things and your perspective. I love your perspective of the game on social media. Where can our listeners follow you on the socials?
Yeah, you could follow at Voice of Cohen too. Used to be at Voice of Cohen, but that account got hacked and my messages to Elon Musk have been unanswered. He's been a little busy lately. So at Voice of Cohen too. And you could always check out the Iowa Cubs at iowacubs.com and at Iowa Cubs on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And then you can follow me on Instagram at Alex M. Cohen. So it'll be, I won't say all baseball all the time, but it'll be most baseball for me. So.
Well, I could just tell you that the way that this is shaping up with all those prospects in Iowa, and again, you mentioned, more that are on their way. I think that truly the city is going to be buzzing and it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks for jumping on, Alex.
Anytime, Crawly. Thanks.
You are listening to Season 3, Episode 88 of the Fly the W670 podcast. Cody Bellinger has opted in. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. We're on all the social media platforms. All right, Crawly, yesterday, awards season got underway, and the Gold Glovers were announced.
Yeah, apparently Rawlings not a big fan of the Cubs, right? Nico Horner did not get a chance to defend his Gold Glove. He was not a finalist. And the one that I was scratching my head about the whole time was PCA. I understand, Nico, there was some really tough competition at second. I'm not mad about it. PCA still kind of chips my hide. But when you look at second base, Ketel Marte for the Diamondbacks, Bryce Terang for the Brewers was phenomenal. Bryson Stott for the Phillies. All those guys were really, really good. And so it doesn't, bother me that Nico wasn't chosen to be on there. I thought that was fair, And so hopefully Nico will bounce back and be in the race for next year. Now I'm sitting there, right? I get the TV.
First we got to hope he's a Cub next year.
Yeah, that is absolutely positively. You're dead right on that. He may not. I'm looking at him and saying to yourself, he's definitely a trade piece. But Bryce Terang from the Brewers was your eventual winner on that one. When you take a look at shortstop, right? When you take a look at shortstop, I don't know anyone that did not think that Dansby was going to get it. I thought Dansby and Ian Happ were locks. Dansby was going for the three-peat. He was the winner of the past 2 National League Gold Gloves in shortstop. He led all shortstops in 2024 with 18 outs above average and was first in fielding run value. When you talk about DRS, defensive runs saved, the top was Mason Wynn. He was one of the candidates. Ezekiel Tovar from the Rockies had a really good season, but Dansby did not win. I think to the shock of everybody. He to me, he is one of the best shortstops, and the fact that he did not get the three-peat was, to me, the most surprising thing to come out of the Gold Gloves yesterday. The Cubs did have one Gold Glover. Ian Happ was going for the three-peat. He won the Gold Glove the last 2 seasons. And once again, this year, he led all left fielders with 8 defensive runs saved, 11 outfield assists, led the NL on that one, tied for the most in the NL with those outfield assists. And so when you take a look at that, for Ian Happ, it was really, he is going to be, according to Megan Montemurro, the first Cubs outfielder to win 3 Gold Glove awards in left field, 5th Cubs first outfielder to win 3 Gold Gloves, and the 5th position player to win at least 3 straight, joining Anthony Rizzo, Mark Grace, Ryan Sandberg, and Ron Santo. So so understand too that it wasn't until later.
Pretty nice company.
Right. And so they used to just give gold gloves to outfielders back in the day. They didn't say left fielder, center fielder.
I like that they break it down.
Yeah, they break it down now. But when I looked at that, it's amazing the amount of first basemen that the Cubs have had that have been talented. Sandberg and Santo, obviously phenomenal. But the one that blows, I guess 3 straight is pretty hard. But to me, not seeing Derek Lee's name on this list, I kind of was looking at that. I was like, Derek Lee never won 3 straight gold gloves, because the Cubs had just a tremendous run of first baseman when you talked about Grace. And then later on, Derek Lee took the position for most of the 2000s after Grace had it in the 90s. And then Rizzo, from the mid 2010s, on, just phenomenal defensive first baseman. And so when you look at this, Dustin, okay, 2 guys in the finalists. What is your expectation for next year when it comes to the amount of Cubs you want to see nominated for Gold Gloves?
Well, every single guy in the outfield as it stands right now, right? Every single one of them,
right?
You want to be part of it. I want my shortstop. I want my shortstop to be on that list. That's for sure.
I think he'll be in the conversation. Absolutely.
Right. I think that's probably. You want them all, but I'm just saying, like, what's realistic, right?
Right. With Isaac Paredes, I just don't see him being a Gold Glover. The only thing I think the Cubs really want him to be is make all the routine plays.
Routine plays and hit 30 home runs.
Right.
Like that would be nice, right? But
the one guy I really want to look at defensively next year is Michael Busch. I thought that he improved a whole lot. I thought that, to me, he was the most improved defensively. I don't know what he's going to do next year, but it'd be awesome if he was. And if you think about like first baseman, I don't think that's like, you got a ton of great, phenomenal first basemen that are, Christian Walker won it for the Arizona Diamondbacks. I'm just trying to think if the Cubs would be there, but I think that I don't think that Michael Busch is going to win it. I'd like to see him on the list.
Yeah, sure. Listen, I wouldn't be up. I wouldn't, if they're all on the list, it'd be great.
I just don't think Isaac Paredes has that in him. I'm very curious to see if Michael Busch does.
Be a big jump, right? He's made a bunch of improvement, but it'd be a big jump.
I think it's possible. I truly, if you just leave him alone at first, if they don't play around with the second base stuff, which we kind of talked about, whispers potentially of Nico being traded, and you could either put Matt Shaw there, or you could put Busch, who played second for the Dodgers. If they just leave him at first to improve, I think that he can be on the list. That is my prediction now on Monday, November 4th, 5:20 p.m. And speaking of Monday, November 4th, Dustin, do you know what it is the anniversary of?
I do. I believe it is the 8th anniversary of the parade.
It is one of those things that I am.
Am I right? You
are 100% right. It is.
I'm sure there's another anniversary today, but the one that matters to us.
Yeah, the one that matters to us more than anything. And I just, every time in Facebook, like, you get the pictures that pop up. 8 years ago, this happened. And I'm looking at the pictures.
Your memories, right? Your memories. Yeah.
Yeah, and just being there. And
yeah, I'm not on Bookface, Crawly, so I don't get those pop-ups.
But I sit there and I think about that, just that moment, and again, when you think about the crowd size, being like, what was it, like 6th on the list of the most largest gatherings in the history of the world, and the others were all like religious, and here's this baseball team that you could argue is religious. But I went back and I watched last night. I watched the speeches from the parade, and I was about 25 to 30 feet away from the stage when they were doing that.
So give me the 24 hours ahead of the parade. How did I, because I'm sure you were standing somewhere at some crazy hour doing some craziness to get that close.
Yeah, I ended up going to a buddy's house, and before I went down there, if you remember, everybody was writing on chalk on Wrigley Field.
Yep.
And so
that was like the weekend before, right?
Well, it was already happening. Like,
okay,
right when I went down there, that's kind of when it, I remember it kind of starting. It wasn't there when I was there at Game 5, and so it's between Game 6 and between Halloween and then, that's when all the bricks started to get painted up with the chalk. And so I went there, I wrote a couple things on a couple different pieces of brick to, in memory of certain Cub fans I knew that didn't make it to see it. And then from there, I went to my buddy's place in Ukrainian Village at about like 9 o'clock at night. I went to bed and I woke up at 2 a.m. to get down to Grant Park. And so I'm just sitting there. And I remember that all the skyscrapers in Chicago all had the Go Cubs, the W, Cubs win, like all the lights that spelled everything out. And you could see it from a distance. And I was basically just standing. I think it was me and about, the first like 20 people that were there. We were just kind of just hanging out, waiting. And we watched the sunrise and the line get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And there was this big fence. And all of a sudden, we were waiting and waiting, and we watched the sunrise, and then we just ran. It was like a scene from like a war movie, because like people were just like falling and getting trampled, and you just
so you just ran to try to get as close as you could. You're
in a full sprint, and so luckily it happened. If it would have happened now, luckily it was 8 years ago. I think I was in a little bit better shape, but you had to make 2 stops, and then it was a straight on sprint to Grant Park. Straight on sprint. And so I'm just flying. And by the time I get there at the end, like my hamstrings were just so sore. And then it was really cool to see all the players. And there was rumors Eddie Vedder was going to be there and sing a song, but it was some other country guy. I can't remember who sang Go Cubs Go. I'm not a big country fan. Sorry. And I was watching it. And then as they're blowing the confetti out and all this stuff, I'm watching, I can see people leaving out the back. So I kind of snuck around the back of the stage. And I have a picture of me with a bunch of the players kind of walking past me. And that was the first time I had ever seen the World Series in person. I want to say Dexter Fowler was carrying it, and it was like 3 feet from me. And I'd never seen the World Series trophy in my entire life. Yeah. And that was, and Chris Bryant, I'll never forget, had a cool a WWE like wrestling belt with like a cool Cubs logo. And I just sat there, and it was such an amazing day. And then the second it was over, I sprinted to my car, flew home, and that's when all the trains ended up just getting jammed and no one could get home, and they're stuck in Chicago. But I could say that that was, again, we had no idea, because we had been there so early, the massive humanity. We didn't know the parade route.
Right.
And so what they were doing is on either side of the stage, they had big screens. Yep. And so we were kind of, at first they were showing highlights of the World Series and the postseason, and then they were showing them going down the parade route, and we were just watching. We're like, how many people? It seems like a lot of people. And when you're looking back, you just see this massive humanity. And then all of a sudden you're sitting there, and when I'm getting home, and all of a sudden I'm realizing, like, people are like blowing up my phone, like, did you make it out of there? Are you okay? Are you going to be able to get home? Do you need a place to stay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm home fine. What happened? They're like, no, we can get out of Chicago. It's jammed solid.
Yeah, and we watched it from just off of Michigan Avenue, down the street from my buddy who lives downtown. And then we went back to his place, had some drinks, watched it all the speeches on TV. So that was, honestly, Crawly, that was the first time I actually felt like I was enjoying the World Series, working at it. And, the crazy hours and the stress and everything else. Like, I got out of work and I walked from the station down Michigan Avenue to my buddy's place. It was a pretty decent walk, and it felt great. It really did. It was like a crisp day. It wasn't cold, but it definitely wasn't warm. Maybe like it was a little bit like today, maybe even. Maybe a little crisper, but yeah, it was great. It was fantastic.
Yeah, to me, it was more than anything. I just sat there and I felt like I could breathe for the first time. Like, all that pressure of like trying to wait, and then all of a sudden it was like a dream. Like, am I really at a Cubs World Series parade? Like, is this really happening? And now, I just remember going to bed that night and just being like, oh my God, I still can't believe that this happened, that we were alive, that we got to witness it. And like I said, Dustin, hopefully, it would more, we can get back there sooner rather than later.
And we've got some more awards coming down the pipe. Seiya Suzuki's up for one.
Yep, Seiya Suzuki was nominated as Silver Slugger Award. So congratulations to Seiya. He had just a really, really good year. He had 21 home runs, which was a career high in his OPS and his OPS plus slugging. So, hopefully Seiya takes the next step, and we're going to be rooting for him to win that Silver Slugger. And, hopefully the Cubs will still be up for more hardware somewhere in the future.
All right, last one before we get out of here. A little business of Cubs. A lawsuit settled with one of the buildings.
Well, it wasn't one of the buildings, but when they did the 1060 project, the Cubs did. There was some lawsuits with the as far as handicap accessibility. And so that is now finally in the rearview mirror. There's going to be some changes at Wrigley. There's going to be more handicap seating in different locations. So that is now in the books.
Gotcha. Very interesting. All right, Crawly, that is a wrap of this episode. Hope everybody enjoyed it. Love to hear what you think about Bellinger. Feel free to drop Crawly and I a line about that. Don't forget to listen, download, review, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast, all the socials, Facebook, Instagram. You can also email us at flythew670@gmail.com. Repost some of your social media memories from 8 years ago on this 4th day of November. And don't forget, you can watch us by subscribing to the 670 The Score YouTube channel.
I'm sitting here and there's going to be moves, and we're going to be here on top of it, hopefully making this team ready to compete for the playoffs come next October. Go Cubs! Hey guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!